One. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of Delusions of Grandeur. And I am one of your hosts and founding fathers of this channel, but I figured I'd hand this over to my friend Brandon over here to get us started about what movie we are reliving today.
We are going to be covering the classic 1990s sequel to the Roger Corman film Rock and Roll High School, which this one is called Rock and Roll High School Forever, directed by Deborah Brock and starring Corey Feldman.
Ooh.
So this
AKA Michael Jackson.
In this film, we're actually just a sequel. The school from the first film has been rebuilt and now renamed to Ronald Reagan High School, where a new crop of students decides to make it their home and trash it every year to celebrate the burning of the school. Teachers, desperate to get these unruly students under control, have hired apparently a Nazi sympathizer to come and take them down.
Worse, he appears to be a Nazi clone of the antagonist from the previous film.
Yeah, she does kind of look like the original antagonist.
She does.
It's the same actress.
I might have to duck out occasionally because this cat's trying to sniff up the broken glass.
I had a feeling it was the same actress.
But so, Jake, is this your first time seeing this film?
No, but this is an interesting one for me. I have actually, as we will discuss in the next on tonight's Inside Movies Galore, so tune in later for that, where we'll discover the original Rock and Roll High School. That was my first time seeing that one. I'd actually seen this one first, almost exactly 20 years ago when I was a freshman at Roanoke, and I was hanging out with those theater movie geeks that introduced me into folks like the Coens and Kevin Smith and all that kind of stuff, and created a monster. And they showed me this film, and I hated it. I thought it was one of the stupidest movies I'd ever seen. So I have not seen it for 20 years. So this was an interesting chance to revisit. Following our Second Chances month, this would have been a good one. And I will say, much like most of the films from our Second Chances month, the Second Chance revealed good results. I will not say that I love it or consider it a classic, but I was able to come to it from a very different viewpoint than I did 20 years ago, and I was able to appreciate the stupid humor a lot more. And it's a fun movie. It's still kind of a stupid movie, but it's a fun movie. It does have some good music.
So, as I was telling Brandon before, I have vague recollections of watching parts of this film on like Nickelodeon or something like that, but I cannot say when or where, but it's been a long time. I will say that. But seeing it for the first time in its entirety, it was a fairly enjoyable film because I have not seen Corey Feldman that young. And especially in a long time.
Oh, okay.
I just haven't voice in a long time because it's been a while since I've visited his childhood movies. His teenager years. And especially when he's spoken out against Michael Jackson and his time spent in Neverland. He very much was imitating Michael Jackson and his moves and his dress in this movie. So to me, I kept saying, "Oh, he's doing the Michael Jackson again." To me, because he wore his hair with that wavy wave in front, exactly like Michael Jackson.
Wave.
For some reason, he just kept reminding me of it. But then again, I had my fiance watching with me, and she said that he actually wore those clothes well. So,
well, yeah. I mean, I watched it first not long after it came out. So it was 91, so I was probably around 12 or 13 when I first saw this, because I remember seeing it fairly early on. It was probably not long after it got out of theaters. And
I thought this one went almost straight to video, didn't it? Or I guess it had a short theater run.
I have no clue. I never saw it in theaters. I was just assuming it had one, but it probably didn't. And this film was one of those. Back when I was a child, I didn't have a lot of movies that I was big into. I had a small grouping of movies that I watched a lot. And this was one of those movies. I mean, it wasn't one that I watched like over 300 to 400 times, like, say, History of the World or Great Outdoors, but it is one that I have watched many, many, many times. And it's just, to me, it was just a classic. And then I went many years without seeing it at all, especially since it was hard to find. Then I found that DVD copy that I had, that I have now. And I was just like, yes, I've got it. Exactly, that one right there. And I just, I had to watch it again. Now, this recent rewatch, I admit, I find myself looking at it from a different perspective. I've actually seen it under 3 different perspectives. As a child, if you could say 12 years old, still somewhat a child there. As a teen, because I watched it all throughout my teens. And then as an adult. And after seeing the first film, it changed it a little bit more for me, especially this time around for some reason. Maybe it's because I'm more observant, but there's a lot of stuff that the first one had that carried over, or that they attempted to imitate in this one, that came through to me as, oh, that's why they did that. Though oddly, I find this one much more controlled than the first one was.
Yeah, it doesn't devolve. That final act doesn't go quite as far off the rails, definitely.
But it was still, to me, it was it's just a classic for me. There's a lot of nostalgia attached to this film for me, which is probably the only one here that has that nostalgia. Maybe when Mo signs in, maybe he'll have some nostalgia for it. But it's still a fun watch for me. So with that being said, I guess we'll launch on into the plot. Well, I'm just going to run through the whole of it, just so that we can get through it. Then we'll just review it. We have, I'm not going to have us run on too much, but it's essentially, you've got this group, as I said, they were breaking down. They hire this Nazi to essentially reign an order. And much like in the first film, the person does not do a very good job of, or too much of a job of reigning in order, and that causes problems. Corey Feldman is the leader of this band called the Eradicators,
Mhm.
or Wombat Vengeance, as later on stated.
I thought, was it Wombat Vengeance or Wombat Venus? Because I thought I heard both of those.
You did hear both of them.
What's that?
You did hear both of those because when they were doing
Okay.
that scene, Wombat Vengeance
Yeah.
was the name that was given to them by the guy that
Right.
was in the bathroom
Right.
exchange, which
Eagle Bauer. Yeah.
carried over from the first film.
Right.
And and then when they were trying to announce their name and the audition, they just kind of threw it out like Wombat Venus.
Now, I have to say, I don't know about Wombat Venus, but I have to disagree with, I think it was Jesse, who said that was the worst name he ever heard. I'm like, Wombat Vengeance is one of the best band names you could have.
So of course, why don't we talk about the main group of characters that this film surrounds? Corey Feldman's character, is it Jesse, I believe?
Jesse Davis, yeah.
And the others in his band. You've got the kind of weird redhead guy,
Mag.
which I identified the most with in high school because I was that weird redhead guy. You had the one female of the group, and then you had the token black guy of the group.
But he wasn't called Token. He was called Jones.
Oh, and the racial stereotype Japanese.
Oh yeah, Namrock. What is that? Your first name or your last name? Namrock.
So
so Mag was the redhead and Stella was the girl. Yeah.
They did not that one aged about as well as the scalping thing in the first movie. Matter of fact, I think that aged worse than the scalping thing in the first movie. My goodness. But what did y'all think of these characters?
Well, like you said, the one was basically a walking stereotype, and that was I couldn't decide if it was amusing or cringy. It was kind of in that gray zone.
More amusing in the 90s, to be sure.
Yeah, definitely. Stella was kind of fun.
I got a kick out of the martial arts dude.
Yeah.
Stella reminded me of. I hate that my memory for names.
The Jason Scott Lee lookalike.
Let's see here. I'm drawing a blank of it,
and I was amused by Jones's thing of having that phone thing on the automatic loop, and then the part where they got the bill was that was kind of fun.
That's who Stella reminded me of. Stella reminded me of a young Christina Ricci, even though she was even younger at the time.
A little bit.
Well, this is the same year Addams Family came out, so. Right. And she was what? How old
Leon
was
Curtis was definitely much older than Christina Ricci at that point.
So it's still.
She was actually 26 when this film came out.
Yeah, she had a Christina Ricci vibe, or a vibe that Christina Ricci got later on.
A little bit. Yeah.
Sort of, but I actually it got more of a Winona Ryder vibe.
Yeah, I think that's probably closer for me too.
Especially if you think of her in Beetlejuice, that whole gothic like Daria vibe.
What about Jesse, our main protagonist / antagonist?
He was pretty fun. He had a couple off moments, but
I like the very beginning scene of this film. and I guess to be honest, it was quite funny when they took and flushed all the toilets all at once just to explode the darn pipes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's even at the end of the movie where the guy's like, yeah, you need to rebuild the school anyway. The plumbing sucks.
Nice little callback to the beginning there.
That scene kind of had me. It wasn't as funny for me that time because I was more thinking, it's like, oh, that's terrible. They're just wrecking this darn school. It has to be cleaned up. But again, this is more of the adult me. Whereas child me was like, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was kind of fun. And then that opening scene. So basically, you have the principal McGree, who I don't know if he's supposed to be the same McGree from the original. Doesn't really look like him, but you kind of get the feeling he could be.
Mm-hmm.
And he's played, of course, by the guy that played Frank on MASH, and is kind of just as hapless here.
Yeah,
he's
he's kind of a weakling in here.
Right.
He kind of just steps back and lets the Nazi take over, you know.
Well, he's kind of taken to the woodshed from the get-go, because that opening scene, you got actually Louis Arquette with a fun little cameo there as Mr. Cheese, and then you had all the others. What was it? Brie, Romano, and what was the other one? But he basically, what was he like, the vice principal or vice principal, whatever he was? But he brought in, the Nazi as the new vice principal. But yeah, that was kind of a fun.
Well, if you noticed, it was weird because they started showing that the guy had brought the test scores like way up in the school. And they even said, like he was an excellent one for academics, but he sucked as a punishment person.
Right.
So I don't know any school that's willing to do that level of destruction. The student body does that level of destruction on a regular basis. That's pretty. That's pretty out of control.
Yeah. Well, at this point in time in the 80s, no one entirely was able to control students or knew how to control students.
Well, there was the faculty.
Well, that was a little later.
Well, the faculty, that's another point in mind, because I don't think during the 80s the teachers at school were ever reprimanded for anything. Because let's face it, school often feels like prison.
Yes, as we heard from the spirit of rock and roll in this one.
And I thought it was kind of interesting how detention was more or less a jail facility.
I like how you had the skeleton sitting there because apparently they had gotten detention that long.
Well, evidently, not only was the skeleton sitting there, but it looked like they had cobwebs on the walls.
Yeah.
Like it had not been dusted or cleaned in quite some time.
Which kind of makes you wonder if she brought that room with her.
Yeah, I was thinking, the school seemed pretty normal otherwise, but she built an entire. She saw that school must have one heck of a budget. They were able to build an electric fence and metal detectors and all that stuff. It just, I don't know. It just seemed like.
No. They did point out that choices would be made because the principal's like, we could have bought books for the library, and she's like, no, Ewan, this is my baby.
If you look at the teachers and the faculty in this, it seems to be there are a couple standouts, and then the rest of them are kind of parodies of teachers, and some of them may have been parodies of teachers from the first film. I didn't feel like the teachers had as much character but there were a few standouts. Like you had, of course, the principal, and you had Vader is all her own thing. So we'll get back to her.
I thought she was the principal.
Vice principal.
Okay, vice principal.
That's the one that deals out the punishment. And then you had our young teacher who teaches music, and she's the love interest of Corey Feldman's character, which now I feel a little bit less happy about that, but it's again time. It's all about the times, and this really was a movie made for teenagers.
Well, who didn't have a teacher that they had a crush on? In high school. I mean, when you're a teenager, you got raging hormones inside of you that you cannot deny or control. So when you're thinking about all the girls that are in your class, the teacher is included. In your retrospective of trying to be a guy. At least at this point in time, you're at the cusp of your teenage years, and you have no cares in the world whatsoever. No responsibility at any given point in time.
In fairness, Sarah Buxton was only 6 years older than Corey Feldman.
Well, I mean, he had even said, if I was, he even illustrated, because I think he talked about their ages there.
Yeah.
If I was 20,
28 and I was 24.
Yeah. So, I mean, my guess is that she was in her the character's supposed to be in her early 20s.
Right.
So that she's only barely graduated. This is her first job.
Well, I guess technically she was a substitute, so that makes sense with it. Yeah.
A lot of the younger ones, substituting is what you go into first on. I mean, I gained that qualifier. I didn't do any of it. You actually got to do some substitute work, Jake. So
not as much as I would have liked. But
did you impress like she did? Were you able to impress the whole class like that?
I didn't have anyone fall for me like that. But that's probably a good thing, given that I never actually was at a high school.
Yeah, that would have been. So let's talk
more like Takanashi.
Let's talk Dr. Vader. What do y'all think of Dr. Vader?
Well, you gotta love the name, right? And she's first introduced. You see the car pulled up with D. Vader on the license plate, and you're like, "Shh, do you want to get sued?"
Well, although she didn't have a cat, she kind of reminded me of Inspector Gadget's claw, just a little bit.
Next time, Jesse, next time.
She had the attachments. I mean, she had her whip for later on in the.
And I liked how the claw was a lighter as well. That was kind of crazy, but
so they took everything about the old person that was there, the old principal, and twisted it into kind of this weird mockery of the character.
Well, what's interesting is that the same theme is through both films. The fact that rock and roll will be heard and will be listened to, and it will not be taken from them, because it's the spirit of the school. No matter which school the school is named, it's going to be rock and roll that will survive. Both. This film is like the polar opposite of the other film, because the first film, and I'm probably going to say it later, but the first film was blown up by the kids. The second film was blown up entirely by the vice principal.
I wouldn't say polar opposite, but definitely a different take.
I would not say polar opposite at all. But yes, the final act was quite
Very
different. And there were certainly some other differences here and there.
Well, yeah, there were some other differences, like the fact that the band was not a well-known band. It was a local band.
The first one was all about the Ramones.
Yeah.
Although it's interesting that the Ramones were like the fifth choice, but we'll get to that on the next discussion.
You did notice that Jesse had a Ramones poster in his room.
Yeah.
That was kind of a throwback to it.
Yeah.
When you had that spirit of rock and roll that came in, and
yes.
Was he trying to emulate Springsteen or something like that? I
don't know. Maybe
he was trying to emulate because it's.
Well, I like dude's name. Mojo Nixon is the guy that plays the spirit of rock and roll.
What's interesting is Mojo Nixon is a band. So I believe that was an actual musician.
That's mostly what he's known for. Yeah.
Oh, maybe
he had a handful. Actually, interestingly, one of his only other acting credits was Toad in Super Mario Brothers. Something to be proud of.
Another musician.
But actually, talking about other roles, one of the supporting characters who apparently is brought over from the original, they don't really specify if he is a descendant or somehow like some sort of never-aging vampire that lives in the school or something. But you have the return of Eagle Bauer, who originally was played by Ronnie Howard's brother Clint, and that was we'll talk about that later. I had fun with that role. But in this version, he's played by Michael Cerveris, which I was thrilled to find out is the dude that plays Professor Pig on Gotham, which was one of my favorite roles on that show.
I think it was. I always liked that concept. It had a very National Lampoon's, old school National Lampoon's concept.
He even has a receptionist.
And I think that's one of the few scenes. That one there is one of the few scenes that I felt really hearkened to the original. A lot of the rest was kind of an echo, but this one I felt like kind of nailed it fairly well.
Right. Although this one was toned down, because I think like in the first one it was like they open up the bathroom door and smoke billows out, and I think they're playing Smoking in the Boys' Room or something. But I love how it's in the men's room, and he still has this female receptionist with a desk right there.
Right.
Well,
I love his character.
High school.
Yeah.
I love his character, although he does play an interesting part because you'd think that the guy who was selling all the illegal shit in school would be a little bit more sleazier than he is.
Yeah. The first one comes off as a little sleazier.
Yeah.
But anyways, Mojo Nixon apparently performs rockabilly music with a heavy satirical and political accent. He has recorded as a soloist a duo with Skid Roper, a duo with Jello Biafra, a former frontman for Dead Kennedys, and with the bands the Todicors and the Pleasure Barons.
And there was also the witch. We can't discount her, the daughter of the witch.
Yes.
Which I just love the scene where it's like, so what food group are onion rings? Fat, definitely fat. And it's like the 4 food groups aren't salt, sugar. What was it? Salt, sugar,
fat, and booze.
Fat and booze. Which she's like, they aren't.
Yeah.
That was the first time she's ever been told.
Where they ended up like investigating her at first because she was weird, but the slightly weirder member of the group fell for her, and they ended up going out. And she ended up being on their side as the time went on.
I did have to wonder if this movie is considered offensive to witches, because they really played that with a broad brush. But it was kind of amusing. And she was cute in her weird way.
Yeah.
They actually made a cute couple in a weird way.
Yeah,
They did indeed. So, looking back at the plot as a whole in the movie, I look at this more of a collection of scenes kind of knitted together with this large plot. And there were different scenes that stuck out. To me, one of the ones that stuck out the most was the refrigerator worship scene.
Actually, I was just looking at the cast. I was just looking at the cast, and I was looking at those two that played was it Miss Snodgrass and Mr. Snodgrass, and oh man, that was a crazy scene. I loved how the husband just got the video camera and was just like, "Man, this is great," And then you had that callback to it later, where the security guard is reading through the paper and he sees something about it.
Well, he said something like, "Oh God, the National Enquirer will love this."
Yes, which apparently they did.
And apparently they made this.
What did they call themselves? It was like the First Lithuanian Church of Large Appliance Worship or something like that.
Yeah.
Another Lithuanian part, because like they're Lithuanians.
And then they opened up their shirts and they all had all those metal objects strapped to their chests. Like,
to me,
it was crazy.
I don't see why that. See, to me, I never considered it that like scary to myself or offensive necessarily. I thought it was stupid. But it was,
that was odd.
But very offensive to the lady there because she fainted. She was so traumatized by it.
You've highly offended me.
I mean, he wasn't offended. He was just like, "Yeah, keep doing it."
and she's like, "Are you guys serious? You're paying me just to look at it?"
Yeah.
And they did. They did give her money, so to me, I didn't feel like it was that bad at all.
Well, everyone needs a hobby.
So the money excuses the cult. Okay.
Oh yeah, I forgot about the other like antagonists, the kind of preppy foursome.
Yeah, you can't forget them.
Yeah.
The one who's like a
cross-dresser,
super wasp Reagan wannabe version of Nabiki, and then her boyfriend that wants to get it on with her. And then you got the other dude who's just weird, and his girlfriend who you knew was going to turn into a
slut.
Yeah. And then of course that whole scene where the four of them got their comeuppance was just great.
Oh, yeah. that whole turn of events when they each got videotaped was hilarious.
Yeah.
My least favorite scene of the movie.
What's that?
That they led into my least favorite scene, which was that thing where they framed him for like doing all the red paint and meat all over the school.
Oh yeah. That was kind of. But no, that
was a bad frame. That was cruel.
Was that before that, or was that the retaliation for that?
That was before that.
Yeah, okay. that was why they decided to go out and do the retaliation at the end.
Which is why it was so great.
So that was the retaliation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was their comeback for the others being little bastards. But yeah, I liked how that one dude, when all the women's undies came out the locker, and the principal just walked by and said something like "cute underwear" or something.
And then, of course, they're all getting undressed in the car, and they're putting their clothes up front, and he's just taking them out the window,
Right.
And they're not even noticing. It's like, the fuck? Don't you notice where you're putting your clothes?
And
meanwhile,
phone.
And meanwhile, Jesse's writing on the door. What was it? Cocks or pigs or something like that. Then they call the cops.
And the cop does like a 180.
Yeah. They must have said, "We see a car with this on."
Yeah, they ran out.
And then, of course, they were given
your hands up.
Yep. That was fun. It was a good time. And the other one they got by just making her very sick, but that was kind of fun. They're dissecting frogs, and the one was sneaking pieces of sushi and making it look like she was eating the frog.
The two like incompetent hall monitor.
That whole dissecting of frogs reminds me of my high school days, because we were I was okay. We were paired with like two other people in high school, and when we dissected our frog, we skinned it, put the skin on a hat, and we handed it to the teacher at the end of the class. So. But our teacher was just that kind of person to be able to laugh at it. So,
yeah.
I'm sorry for killing a frog like that. Actually, the frog was already dead.
Yeah.
It's just, he didn't eat it.
Now, of course, if you remember anything about those dissection events, what makes it even more disgusting in my mind is the fact that they were soaked in formaldehyde. It's like, oh man, yeah. It's actually probably worse for you to eat formaldehyde soaked piece.
That would definitely have made me uncomfortable to see.
Yeah, a little bit.
I've had frog legs before, and they're okay, but I wouldn't have had those frog legs or anything.
And yeah. And this probably wasn't
for my taste buds, to be honest.
I guess this probably would be worse than Crunchy Frog, though.
Now, the two idiots that they had as the hallmark, how did they compare to you to the original?
I'd say these were like full-blown security guards. Like the original was more like a hall monitor sort of thing, but this is kind of but yeah, they were idiots. They were total idiots.
Yeah, I mean that scene, all they had to do to take them out for the prom was just to send them a bottle of booze. And then they're just sitting there cutting up, like pretending they're in Star Wars, where they're like fighting with rockets on their head.
Right.
I kind of felt like the teenage hall monitors in the first one had a little bit more competence to them.
A little. They certainly were more dedicated to their job.
Well, these guys were just kind of like old town cops.
Yeah.
Anything else that y'all want to put into the plot or the characters?
Well,
we probably kind of covered most of the characters, at least a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Who are some of the other?
And you had the stripper.
Stripper.
Oh, we're talking about the male stripper, right?
Yeah, it's like
Oh,
I've been
right.
boy, I need to be punished.
Yeah, he just he just lays on top of her car and is like, "I've been very dirty."
Yeah. I'm assuming he's the one. I'm assuming he's the one credited as Naughty Boy.
Yeah, I think
Which
so.
I find it amusing that the actor's name is Randy.
Uh-oh.
Oh, Randy Irwin, apparently. Yeah.
Yeah, that was but they knew how to appeal to her at that time. That was what would appeal to her sensibilities.
Yes.
And
she happened to have a whip attachment. Are we at all surprised?
No,
not really.
Yeah.
Not really.
Which, of course, yeah.
The fact that they were flinging the food at the cooks.
Oh yeah.
No, that was in the original.
Oh yeah,
You talk.
I remember how.
Yeah, that's right. Damn it.
Oh yeah, that was at the end of that one because they tied up the nerdy guy, the freshman, and were making a freshman helper out of him. So that was a different one.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
so the main one here with the food, I think, was the scene with Tabitha. That was the main.
That's
food
right.
Scene.
When they were on stage and they puked all over everyone.
Well, there was that too. No, I was talking about the scene where they found out her eating habits, which were unusual.
No, I want that big piece of fat over there. That
big piece.
That big piece. Literally just looking at her like.
Right. And then she goes and gets a chocolate pie and smashes it up right in the middle of everything. Now, granted, chocolate does make everything better.
Yeah, I guess so.
I guess so.
Yes.
That school still had better food than what I got in school. Well, I mean, no, I liked the pizza I got at school, but there wasn't that much variety in my school lunches. So it was there. And I don't recall third period lunch being quite as
unique.
Yeah, you would have thought Dr. Vader would have, would have come down upon the people, the gang members with the machine guns that they were loading at the middle of.
She probably got along with them.
Oh,
they were probably sitting around shooting the shit, talking about calibers and the best way to maintain the weapons.
So, how did y'all think this? My assessment of it was more of them trying to repeat what they did with the first one, and at some places try and go a little bit further down, but ending up seeming more muted, or more of a muted version of the first one.
I actually feel like this one was better. I actually feel like this one was better than the first one. Because to me, the first one was more or less a music video for the Ramones.
I do think this one had a lot of. It did have a lot of the feel of the original, a lot of the spirit of the original, and they definitely did go out of their way to make callbacks to the original.
Yeah,
but it was more muted. It did have, and yeah, Dave, I do agree. The first one seemed really heavy on the Ramones. This one, it was more of course, the Exterminators were the main music act, and they were central to the action. But it wasn't as much of a gushing over their music as
the
just they were the Eradicators. Yes,
Eradicators.
The Eradicators.
Well, I think Exterminators. I think House 2 with Cliff Clavin, basically.
It's a good story.
Yeah.
Now I can't help but think he would have been a great choice for this film.
I could have seen him in one of the teaching roles.
Yeah.
Oh, he comes in as the spirit of rock and roll.
Oh, geez. Well, when they remake it, maybe that could happen. Oh, man.
So let's go on into the special effects.
Actually, no, that does remind me, though, of a horrid missed opportunity. As much as I thought Mojo Nixon was great, a rocker who made an album called Mojo, who I understand was one of the people approached for the original film. And I actually, years ago, had an idea of a similar concept in a movie, and I had cast this guy. And unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But this movie would have been so much more awesome if Tom Petty had been the spirit of rock and roll.
Yes,
That would have been great.
Yes, it might have been.
But, oh well.
So special
What might have been.
There were some that were utilized.
Yeah.
I mean, they did the whole event with destroying the school at the beginning and at the end of the movie, and they had the whole like red paint and meat thrown all over the school for that thing.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought was disgusting, and I didn't care for that part for some reason.
Really, I thought you liked all that blood and guts and all that stuff.
It has to have a purpose.
It wasn't as disgusting as looking at the cake that Miss Trunchbull in Matilda had the cook bring to the high school stadium.
Okay.
So what did y'all think of the effects?
Well, they were serviceable. Yeah.
I thought they went with what was needed. I mean, I love the fact that the school shook and whatnot. I have to admit that whole flushing of toilets was like my ultimate favorite part because everyone participated in that. And that just sounds like something that some of my high school friends would have done at one point in time.
You think that
well, of course, you have that lovely disclaimer at the start of the film that's like, the pranks in this movie are by professionals. Don't do them yourself or you will land in permanent detention.
See, this is like one of those high school prank movies that you have to sit back and enjoy some of the pranks. Okay, it's a dog eat dog world out there. If the principal is going to make it rough on you, you might as well make it rough on them.
So, well, in this case, the principal really wasn't doing anything wrong. The vice principal later on was, but it made me wonder what kind of budget the school had to have to rebuild every year after they wrecked the school completely for that anniversary.
Speaking of the pranks, I have to admit, this was kind of disgusting, but I had to admit it was amusing. And that's when they were doing the drug testing.
Oh, yeah.
And the security guards were watching them closely, and then they all poured apple juice. And they're like, you got my pee. No, you got my pee. No, and then they started drinking it. This is mine. Okay.
They kind of watch it around.
And then the security guys are just like grossed out. Yeah. That was a creative prank. And I was just reminded because I was looking at the quotes, and one of my favorite quotes was with the security guards. They were watching the events of Naughty Boy and the Vader, and Dale's like, she's licking his bosom.
Hey,
Oh,
hey, Mo,
Hi.
what's up?
You don't want to hurt the boy,
that's
Harvey.
that's not Mo. That's a DC comic reject. Wait,
He's
no,
Batman.
he's
not-
Batman from the 1930s.
We're not doing Batman tonight.
Okay, so you're Batmo.
Hi.
That's it right there, Batmo.
There you go.
So, was this your first time seeing Rock and Roll High School Forever?
It is. It was. Yes, a lot of quality Corey Feldman stuff up in there.
So
I enjoyed it. Reminds me a little bit of a Trauma movie for some reason. Yeah, I don't know.
It's like an older Trauma movie.
Right.
Especially the meat revenge part.
Yeah, I enjoyed it though, man.
All right.
I mean, I think I'll always lean more towards the first one because it's just got more of a classic vibe. But definitely a fun sequel. I'm glad that it spawned one.
The camera looks a heck of a lot better when I've got it when it's divided into fours. I think this is good. We need to make sure we keep that.
Well, you're gonna lose it for just a moment. I'll be right back.
No! Now it's all blurry again. But we were getting ready to launch into the music, which really is, for Rock and Roll High School, it should be probably the star of it all. And they used a lot of classic tunes, or reused a lot of classic tunes for this one. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, what y'all think of it?
I thought it was good. I think that they kept the spirit alive pretty well in terms of the music. It's not a letdown or anything. I don't know. I actually didn't. I meant to sit down and get a list of all of the songs that were on both of the soundtracks.
That's a lot of songs.
Yeah.
I listened to the original movie's soundtrack constantly for the last week, so I had that one down pretty well. But
that one I'm pretty up to speed on. Did either of these get a soundtrack album? Because I didn't think they'd be both great, candidates for it.
Well, I mean, the original one does have an album, which like I say, I've got this sitting in my car, as a matter of fact.
Nice.
Which is pretty cool. It's got a good mix of stuff there. Of course, mostly the Ramones, but
Right.
they even have that Rock and Roll High School performed by, was it whatever her name was. I can't remember any of their names. But they had both versions of Rock and Roll High School, the one with the Ramones and the one that she did.
PJ Souls.
And they did a different rendition of Rock and Roll High School, which I didn't feel like was as good as the original one. Hey, Dan.
Hey, Dan.
We're wrapping up Rock and Roll High School first, and then we're gonna relaunch into the original.
Yep, because I'll have another link ready for that. But you're more than welcome to spout off whatever you like about this movie. So,
Or your experience with it or whatever.
Yeah,
I've seen the second movie, yes. And that's why I really didn't bother joining in on the discussion because I'm sure you guys shit talked it for the full hour. So.
Oh yeah. Well, as I pointed out, the first time I saw this was 20 years ago, and I absolutely hated it. But I did like it better this time around.
Yeah, it's no Batman Forever. That's
I watched it 6 months ago, so.
It's nostalgia for me, but when you watch it at the age of 12 and see it constantly from then, it has that hold on you there. But I didn't. I can look at it objectively. So, what did y'all think about their twist on the Rock and Roll High School theme? To me, it's not all that great, but darned if it isn't an earworm.
It's a little bit.
I don't know. It kind of reminded me like I don't know, like a Monkees version of the Rock and Roll High School instead of the Ramones version of Rock and Roll High School. So.
I don't know, man. I just get lost in Feldman's luscious locks, and I'm done. So.
The problem was, had they called it anything other than Rock and Roll High School, they probably would have been all right. But there was such a standard from the first one that it really had nothing to do with rock and roll. It should have been like Pop High School.
Oh yeah,
Right.
80s Pop High School.
Well, they could have used like Girls Gym, one of the alternate titles for the first one.
Well, I
Disco High School.
I kept thinking that Corey Feldman was trying to be like Michael Jackson throughout the whole thing. So
No, it was 100%.
I'm pretty sure that sums up like the last couple decades of that kid's life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course he spoke out against all that shit. You know, like years later, like I didn't like my years at Neverland. You know, so.
Yeah.
I looked at the theme, the way that they did it, and it was kind of a reflection of what the film was. It is kind of a muted version of the original. I feel like they tried to reach for the original and then came up short.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting to hear your point, and it's weird because I'm the one who has like the nostalgia factor for it, but I feel like I'm the one attacking the film more.
Good times.
I will say this: I did hear Frogger in his voice at least once while he was talking to the only black kid in the film. So
We'll call him Token.
So, but in any case, anyone have
Actually, that brings up
moment?
that does bring up a good point.
Hmm?
Does that make the vice principal even more evil and Nazi-ish? That this group happens to contain the only black kid and the only Asian kid?
As long as she's not calling it the final solution before she holds a book burning, I think. That was a bit on the nose in the first
that
one.
record burning in the first one. That was bad.
Brought the tone down considerably for a minute there.
Well, with that, I guess we could start wrapping up with favorite scenes. So we can take a brief break and we'll move to the main event. So, who wants to go first? Actually, does anybody have a favorite scene they want to throw out for this movie?
Well, I think I've already said mine. The first beginning scene when the pipes burst. I'm sorry, but when they all flushed the toilet at the same time, that was kind of cool. And
That's enjoyable. I like to think of my favorite scene as just a culmination of all of the Feldman footage. You know, I was just.
Dance in front of the whole school as he was
Doesn't it? I mean, it just strikes me as some shit he'd probably do in real life, you know.
Let me guess. You would have been one that would have wanted to see him play the stripper part, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I'd be down.
I could see him doing that, sadly.
But
see, like I said, I think my favorite moment was the part where Dale's like, she's licking his bosom. But there were a few good parts scattered throughout. It was, yeah.
It's definitely not the worst sequel. I just can't think of a worse one offhand right now.
No.
But
Well, actually,
they're out there.
Oh, yeah, like Christmas Vacation 2 comes to mind.
Oh, good God. That's like PTSD. It brings it back.
Joe Dirt too.
Oh God, I was about to say that because I saw it at Walmart earlier, and I was like, "Holy shit, that's a."
No, I thought the first Joe Dirt was okay, but why was there a sequel?
That second one was the worst movie I've ever seen.
I don't know, but they just, that recent Netflix documentary on Joe Dirt really fucking brought a lot of things to light that I didn't know about before.
Okay.
I would say the refrigerator worship scene was that, and its strangeness. If I were to take it out of the fact that it was a jerking throwaway that wrecked the continuity of the movie. Not the continuity, sorry, wrecked any rhythm the movie actually had. I would still say it was a funny scene.
It was a funny scene, yes.
I mean, who doesn't like a little bit of refrigerator worship now and then?
Yeah.
Oh, so I guess with that, we'll go ahead and start wrapping this up. Anybody want to just do brief introductions for this as far as the pre-show?
I am Batman. That's all I have.
No, you got to do it in his voice.
Oh, sorry. You don't want to hurt the boy, Harvey. Yeah, I don't know. Like I just recently did a Moon of the Wolf review, Drunken Master Studios. Give it a look if you're bored. Watch the movie.
Awesome.
Good times.
Well, Septum Sin of Septum Sin versus the World. We love physical media. And even in this time, so we still manage to figure out ways to get our videos out. So check us out if you have the chance.
Yeah. Including our live stream last night, which Dave and Mo joined us for.
Yeah, that was really fun. We'll probably do another one next week, just to just have some fun, just to talk movies and then just enjoy ourselves. It's what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. All right. And I'm Kodabuki Jake, and I'm often on that channel, and we have a lot of fun. And check out our big videos. There are a lot of them. But there are little videos too. They're all fun.
Dan, a little bit about yourself, and then I'll go last, and then I'll create a new link for the other one. So,
I'm Dan. I'm late to the show, but I do Rebel Gaming Club, and that is all.
awesome. My name is David Strege. I am a founding father of Inside Movies Galore, as well as Delusions of Grandeur. You can find video reviews of films and pickup videos on my channel as well. But we will be going on about the first film that started this franchise momentarily. So stay tuned for that shit, and we will holler back at you later. So everyone, stay fun in rock and roll.
Oh, and remember, don't do those pranks at home with your school when you get back.
Right.
It's blowing up the school is probably not a good idea.
Right.
I don't need to anymore. Shit's canceled.
You may think it'll keep you